Hey, I'm Grace with Blue Summit Supplies.
And I'm Shannon.
And today we're talking about folders. Shannon, so you're a folder genius. Tell me how that came to be.
I am now. So when I first started working here, our boss wanted me to write some product descriptions about some of these folders that we were selling. And so naturally I went on the internet and Googled it, and there was a lot of non-information out there. It was very unhelpful. So for instance, things like a classification folder, I was like, but what do people actually use classification folders for? And all it would tell me was, it's a heavy pressboard folder with dividers and prongs. And I was like, but what do you use it for? And I couldn't find anything I wanted. So I quickly became an expert in all things folders.
And now she's our resident folder expert. So today she's going to walk us through some of the finer points of folders and answer some questions like the ones you just raised. What are certain folders used for? What are they made out of? What are the differences in materials? And why are some more expensive than others? So let's talk first about durability. Let's talk about folder durability.
Yeah, so I mean, depending on what you're going to use your folders for, obviously we know folders can get pretty expensive. You know, you can spend, $45 on a box of folders depending on what you're getting. So if you just need something to throw some documents in and protect it while you're carrying it from one place to another, something flimsy might be fine. A lot of times we'll have student grade things, which is going to be a little more economy style, less like heavy duty. But then, if you work in an office where you need your files to stay protected, you're handling your files all the time, or if you are, a higher level student, maybe not elementary, and you're pulling your folders in and out of your backpack constantly, you need something that's going to stand up a little more. Sure. So, you might have things like file folders are typically made out of a relatively flimsy material. This is like an 11-point paper. And the point, you'll see points used to describe papers a lot, and that just means like how thick it is. So this would be like an 11-point, but then you might have things like pressboard, like on our classification folder, and that's much thicker. That's almost like a thick cardboard, and that's more like a 25-point. Then you can also have things like, here's my plastic folder. You can have folders made out of PP plastic, which means polypropylene, and obviously that's going to be some of your most durable because it's plastic. It's not going to rip or tear the same way that paper and cardstock will. Then a couple other things that you might have that increase durability. You can have things like reinforced tabs, which I know I have some of those around here. This blue guy. Nope, this blue guy. The tab here has been folded over where it's double thickness, and so that's going to be reinforced. And then one other thing that can increase durability is you can see on here where there's a little bit of a coating on this. So the tops of these hanging folders are both folded over, and then they're also coated in plastic, and that gives it a little bit more of a durability factor.
So you're not going to rip the edges with these?
So it's a lot less likely to rip, and if you have things that are tearing on it or pulling back and forth, it just gives it a little bit something extra. It's almost like the gloss coating you'll have, like if you get photo printed, glossy or on glossy paper. Right. That's kind of the same thing.
That makes sense. Okay, great. So durability's done. So we get that. Makes sense. There's a lot of options. There's too many options.
So many options.
Yeah. So moving on to size, I know that we have there's different standard sizing in the U.S. versus around the world, but for U.S. sizing, what are the two most standard folder types?
So typically in the U.S., you're going to have letter size and legal size. So letter size is going to be your typical, and what that means is it holds that size paper. So the folder itself is not actually going to be letter size, but the paper that fits inside of it will be letter size. Right. So, and it's usually about maybe a half an inch wider on the edges. So this would hold a letter size piece of paper, and letter size is 8.5 by 11 inches. Okay. That's going to be your standard like copy paper or notebook paper. And that's really what's used most often in our offices and at school and things like that. Now the other size that you're going to have is legal size, and that means it holds a legal size paper, which is 8.5 by 14. And so those pages are just a little bit longer. A lot of times you see those used in legal offices for contracts, sometimes in rental offices, and sometimes in medical offices. Right. And sometimes people use other documents from them too, just like financial documents and things like that, but that's going to be a lot wider. So it's important to know which one you want and to be careful when you're shopping online if you need legal size or letter size, depending on not only what size paper you're going to use, but what size filing cabinet you have, what style filing cabinet you have.
So to compare, you've got a letter and a legal.
Yeah.
We did it. We did a good job.
See how it's the same width, basically, it's taller.
Longer.
Yeah.
All right. And so then we talk about volume. So I see some of these folders have thicker bottoms than the other. Can you speak a little bit to volume?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it all comes down to how much you need to store in a specific folder. Sometimes if you just have a basic file folder like this, obviously it's just folded once along the end and that's it. But you might notice sometimes on file folders where there's these little lines, and that's because you can fold them open to make it room for more in there, and it squares off the bottom.
These you mean like these scoring lines?
Yeah, the scoring
These
lines
guys?
along
Okay.
the bottom.
Gotcha.
So, and this hanging file is similar, where it comes flat and then you fold it open and you put this little cardboard doohickey in there and it keeps it nice and firm along the bottom, and it makes these are called expansion folders.
Okay.
Where they expand to hold more.
That's intuitive.
One other way that you can have more is things like classification folders. So these typically have dividers inside of them. So you can, and they have these prongs on the top where you have lots of sections where you can hold lots of folders in there, as opposed to just a regular fastener folder where you wouldn't have any dividers inside.
It's like a transformer.
Yeah, and so classification folder, I mean, you can get 1 divider, 2 divider, 3 dividers.
As many dividers as
So
you
many
want?
dividers.
There's no end to dividers.
I know.
Okay, so what about colors? Because we've got a lot of different colors, and they look pretty, and we love our colors. Shannon is the genius who picks out all of our colors. But what is the significance? Why would you invest in different colored folders?
Sure. So, I mean, standard manila, you see these all the time. Pretty standard, pretty boring. And then I don't think we have an example in here, but you also see a lot of times just that dark green kind of classic color hanging
like
file
gray
folder.
green.
Yeah. So they're pretty traditional. But now, thanks to modern technology, modern printing technology,
Yeah.
you can have all the colors under the sun, and that's really useful for color coordinating in your office.
Right. So it's
That's
an organization tool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's useful for things like if you're pulling files out of your folder, out of your hanging files, and you need to grab, that like the red file has something specific you're looking for.
Okay.
And it's also helpful for refiling documents back into your files, and you're like, okay, I'm going to make sure I put it in the red one instead of just like sticking it in there.
Yeah.
And you can really avoid misfiling that way.
That makes sense.
Plus, they're really pretty.
Yeah, they are pretty.
They're really pretty.
Okay, we have colors. What about tabs? Because I think the tabs are relevant, right? Where they are, what they are. So you can talk a
Yeah.
little about like positions of tabs, because this one has a side tab, or what do you call them?
Yeah, okay. So a lot of times in like a traditional file folder, you're gonna have this, where it's along the top. Sometimes they're in different positions, and that's called a top tab because it's along the top of the folder, okay? And then other times, you might have something where the tab is along the end, and that's called an end tab folder. A lot of times these are used in medical offices for vertical filing cabinets where you stick them in this way, and you'll see sometimes in doctor's offices where they have like these colored blocks and these colored tabs along the side, and that's just how they do their filing system. Okay. So that's typically what end tab file folders are used for. You really want to make sure if you're ordering end tab file folders that you have a filing cabinet that uses those, because otherwise it's not going to fit. So the other thing to know is that they cut in different sizes. So this is what's called a 1/3 cut. And so that just means the whole length is cut into 3 parts. So they're about 1/3 of the width. Then you also have sometimes that are a little bit wider.
We had
an example of,
hold please.
we don't have any 1/8 cut folders, but we have some dividers to kind of show the example of. So this is an 1/8 cut. So you can see where it's divided into 8 different sections. Typically you're gonna have 1/3 cut, 1/5 cut, or 1/8 cut as your options. But more often than not, especially with file folders, 1/3 cut is standard.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about tab labeling and inserts.
Yeah, so obviously if you have a bunch of different files, you need to label them somehow. So usually you'll do that just on the tab. You can usually write directly on here with a pen or marker. You can also print out labels. These are just little adhesive labels. That's usually the most popular way people do it, especially if you're going to use them over and over again. People just put a label over a label. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, and on hanging file folders, is these little tab inserts. Usually if you buy these, you can take them off. You can put them wherever you want all along the edge.
I love tab
which is
freedom.
helpful if you have like a whole bunch of them.
That makes sense.
And you can put them in different locations. So these usually come in the box when you buy them. They come with these little paper inserts, and you stick them in there. If you don't have paper inserts, you can cut your own. Like, it's not very fancy.
Anyone can do it.
Anyone can do, even me. So that's how labeling works.
Okay. Well, thanks. That was informative.
Yeah.
Let's talk about fastener folders.
Ooh.
The different kinds of fasteners, bonded, embedded. There's so many options.
So fastener folders are basically file folders that have prongs in them. So you can fasten your documents in here. We all know about 3-hole punch stuff that goes into a binder. This is where you'll have the 2-hole punch along the top of your paper. And these bend, and you stick your paper in there, and it fastens your folders in there. So if you're like throwing things around the office, your stuff's not going to fall out.
It's all staying in there.
It's all stayed in there, which again, and this is something we'll talk about in a minute, that's very helpful for things like contracts, financials, things like that you don't want falling around, you don't want getting out of order, you want to keep them all nice and safe.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So one other thing I wanted to mention about this type of folder is there's 2 different kinds. So there's embedded, which is where you can see the metal is actually embedded into the paper itself. And then there's bonded, where it's glued on. Oh, there we go. There's bonded, where it's glued on like this. It's not really one better than the other. One reason you may use one over the other is that the embedded folders, sometimes because that's metal, it might tear or scrape on your papers a little bit on the inside or the outside. It's really not something that happens a lot, but sometimes people prefer that. It also looks cleaner on the outside.
Is there a price difference between the two?
I don't think so.
Not really.
I mean, they're basically the same thing.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's the difference between bonded and embedded.
Cool. Okay. So a second ago, you pulled out this monster. Can you talk about what you would use a classification folder for and why there's so many pieces?
This is the whole reason we did
this
entire
is the start.
thing.
Yeah.
So classification folders, basically, they look like this. Usually, they have a little bit of an expansion along the end, and then inside they have dividers. Okay, so the cover is usually pretty thick, like a thick 25-point press board, and the inside's a little bit thinner, but still pretty sturdy. It's like a 17-point craft paper. So what this is, it's basically a fastener folder, except it has dividers in it. So what you would typically call something that has 2 dividers is going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 section classification folder. So you can hold a lot of documents in here, especially because this stretches all the way open.
That's a transformer.
Right. So again, I mentioned this earlier. Usually people use classification folders at law offices for project management.
So really document
for research projects. Yeah. Sometimes medical offices. I think Owen, our boss, uses these for our employee folders. Like he keeps different files on here, like maybe your job description here and your
all the
health insurance
glowing
here,
positive reviews here,
all the stuff you've done wrong here.
Right, sure. That's your folder. Yeah.
So that's how classification folders work. And again, these come in legal or letter. And
this is illegal, right?
This is legal size. You can tell because it's huge.
Yeah, it's giant.
So.
Gotcha.
So that's that.
Okay, and so what about hanging folders? Those are fun.
Those are fun. So obviously you're going to use these in a file cabinet. There's those little metal rods that go through, and this is what you hang them on. So you have your folder itself, and then these little hangers.
Tab guys.
And those are metal. Ours are, typically, you're going to find that they're coated, just like ours, and that helps it glide a little bit smoother. And then they can be straight up and down, which I don't think we have an example of, or these are expansion, where they get bigger along the bottom. Really, the biggest thing to know about these is you get what you pay for. If you get some that are very flimsy and then you put a bunch of files in it, it's just going to rip and fall out. So you want to make sure you're getting something that's pretty substantial. Having this reinforced along the top and on the bottom is really helpful because that makes it last longer. And then also, you're going to want to make sure you get the right size. This is a common problem. People order legal size when they meant to get letter size and vice versa, and then it doesn't fit in their filing cabinet.
You hate to see it.
So just make sure you're getting the right size.
And what about this guy? This is just...
So this is an expansion folder. Okay, so it comes with this little cardboard doohickey in there, and you get it, and you fold these edges in, and it sticks right in there, and it makes it so the flat bottom is nice and flat and supported.
But not all, right? Because this is also expansion, isn't it?
Yeah, so sometimes, especially smaller ones or more traditional ones, they'll expand just a little bit, like in case, like, oops, you have too many files in there. It'll expand a little bit, or sometimes it'll bend around the bottom, but it may not. It may not really call for heavy duty.
Okay.
So. 2-pocket folders, typically we think about school, right?
Yeah.
So your kids probably need these for school. Little kids, big kids, all kids use them. 2-pocket folders.
Grown-up kids.
So it's basically going to be a nice relatively thick folder, and then on the inside is folded up, so you can have these two pockets, so you can put your school projects in.
It's
and
like a
things
dress
like
with
that.
pockets.
Exactly.
Just as fun.
So usually you'll have some with prongs or without prongs, depending on what your teacher asked for or what's going to be useful for you. So this would be without prongs. This kind has prongs, and that's where you can put 3 hole punch papers, loose leaf paper,
The
like lined
prongs are
paper.
inside. The prongs are in the middle of the folder. I did not know what
Is
we were
this news
talking
to you?
about. It is. I work here. Anyway, cool.
So a lot of times you'll use these. Kids will put lined paper in here and use it like a journal, or keep a record of their work in here, and that's what my kids use them for at school anyway. The other thing sometimes these have is little business card slots.
Oh yeah.
Because not only children use these. I think, yeah, you can kind of see that where a business card will slide right in there. That can be useful. A lot of times people use 2-pocket folders in the business world for presentations, or like new client folders. They'll put some of the brochures and things that they need to have in there, and then they'll stick their business card in there so it's in a noticeable place. It's not going to fall out, and that's really useful. One other thing you can have that I don't have an example of here is these also come, well, two things. One, they can come in plastic, which we have, which are
here's
awesome.
an example of our plastic folders.
Those are incredible for students
durability.
because they will pull them in and out of their backpack, and they will tear them up, and they will break after 2 months of school, and then you have to buy a new one.
I feel like you're speaking from experience.
I'm not saying this has happened to me
Okay.
many times.
Yeah, sure.
So plastic ones are great. Another thing you can get is they come with 3 hole punches in them, so you can stick your folder inside your binder,
Gotcha.
and that's useful too.
Yeah.
So.
So if you want to learn more about folders, which I totally get, who doesn't, you can check out our blog at bluesummersupplies.com/blog. We have a post about folders and a post about filing and all kinds of good resources actually about folders. We read a lot about folders. And if you want to grab some folders.
Say folders again.
Folders. And if you want to grab some folders, just go to bluesummersupplies.com and there's a whole section for folders. The end.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.